with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 18th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps away from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. That, of course, would be downtown Brooklyn, USA. Day two of our Majority Report, social isolation. Starting a little late today on the program, Dave Weigel, Washington Post political correspondent on the zombie primaries yesterday. Also on the program today, primaries postponed in 5 other states. Congress now on to coronavirus phase 3 bill. In dealing with our crisis, it's clear our understaffed government is totally rudderless. Meanwhile, we were able to launch new sanctions against Iran, already devastated by coronavirus. Some good news, Dan Lipinski out in Illinois as the Justice Democrats supported Mary Newman pulls out a victory in the Democratic primary. Courts close, but immigration courts still packing them in. And a secret federal plan predicts at least 18 months before this crisis ebbs. Meanwhile, around the country, reports of job losses and, of course, austerity. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I want to apologize. We started a little late today. Still just working out the entire procedure here and the processes. I'm having to do a lot of stuff. And we have a fairly complicated show. And we've been contemplating, going to technologies that are a little bit simpler. We are unable to stream our audio live today. I don't know if this, I don't know how much, on YouTube, for instance, people are aware of it, or on podcast, but we do something and have been doing something that's fairly unique in this space. I mean, I think TYT probably does something a little bit similar, but we do a live show that is on 5 or 6 different platforms, both video and audio. It streams to our own app, obviously to YouTube and Twitch and to Vimeo and to Periscope. And we also take phone calls and do live interviews. And, when you have full team, everybody has their sort of silo, as it were, and it gets done. But when we do this, we're having to sort of recreate the entire workflow that we had established over the course of, 3 or 4 years. And so it's a little bit tricky. I'm looking right now at the backdrop. I don't know how to work any computer programs, except for I somehow just sort of I take a guess and then I get it launched. And so we're running OBS. I got to learn into what that's about. And then, we've got images and different elements that you start to realize as you do the show. Oh, I've never logged into my Dropbox on this computer. Or, I need this program to bring the audio in because I'm playing it on this and because of that OS. And so it's a little bit tricky, but I appreciate your indulgence. I just don't like starting late and not being as prepared as I want to be, but we'll get there. Let's do this again. Yesterday we did some plugs and notices, and we had folks send in some notices. Basically what we're looking for is, a lot of people are going to be hurting. A lot of people already are hurting from a financial standpoint. If you got a plug, you want something for us to plug, we will plug it for you. If there is a notice, if there's a plug, particularly of something that is, set up online to help folks in your community, tell us what it is, and we'll get the word out. And then some of these notices are just things that people think is important for other people to know. Right now, I'm not particularly editing them. I'm just pulling them. And if you send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com and put plugs and notices in the subject line, we will do it. One thing, and part of what I want to do here with this as well is because between all of us on this show, we do so much reading that, we come across these things. Now, I imagine many of you have seen this sort of email or text chain that's going around about a member of the Stanford Medical University or something to that effect. And all of that is not correct. That is not, I don't think it actually even came from anybody at Stanford. My understanding is that it's not something that you can rely on. That's the thing where you hold your breath for 10 seconds in the morning, and that tells you if you have coronavirus or something to that effect, or drink warm water, or on and on like that. That's just not, no. That apparently is nothing to be, there's nothing there that's worth you relying on. Let's put it this way. Also out there has been the claim that ibuprofen is dangerous to take if you have coronavirus, because apparently the inflammation that it suppresses is, I'm not exactly sure why. I've seen mixed things about this. I can tell you that it is a French study that is reporting that. Beyond that, there doesn't appear to be any data. So that's all I can tell you. I'm not a doctor. But I can tell you that there is a French study that's out there. Other people are saying it's not true, but there is, in fact, a legit French study that's out there that showed that. Now, this study has obviously just been done recently. There's also been reports, at least by Reuters, that coronavirus can be aerolized. It can live in the air. It's not clear that anybody's caught it from it being in the air, but that they have been able to measure that it does live in the air for some period of time, as opposed to droplets that have been, projected when you cough. All I'm doing is just telling you I've read about a half a dozen varying competing things about it, and that's all the information I can give you. But I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful on some level. Minnesota yesterday announced that Governor Walz has passed an executive order that unemployment insurance is waiving the standard 1-week waiting period to provide immediate relief due to the closing of many restaurants and entertainment venues. They'll also be providing unemployment to those who need to stay home due to our school closures or being sick family members being sick instead of only being able to apply after being fired or laid off like usual. You can find out more information at uimn.org. We should also say that Walz is suspending collective bargaining for public workers. That's part of our austerity packet. That is from Cody. This is from Nick. I live in Bend, Oregon. I donated platelets and plasma on Sunday. The people at Red Cross stated they are looking at having a 40% decrease in the number of usual donors here locally. Go to your local blood services website, see if you're a viable donor. Hospitals and clinics are going to be straining their blood product supplies during the COVID-19 weeks and months. There was also some report out there that you get your blood tested, and that would be a way to test if you have COVID-19. Apparently, that is not the case. So those are our plugs and notices for Wednesday, March 18th. And send them in. If you have some that you think it's important for other people to know, send in majorityreporters at gmail.com. Put in the subject line, plugs and notices. We'll take a look at them. And we will get on that for you. We're running a little bit behind, so we won't play a clip before we get to Weigel. You know, we're going to massage the format of the show to see what is effective, and bear with us, and we'll play around with that stuff. And also, I just want to say that I don't know how much longer we're going to have sponsors or the sponsors we have. A lot of them are web-based, which is good. And presumably they'll be able to function, but we'll see. So in the meantime, definitely going to read these ads. And if you have the opportunity to support these sponsors of the show, by all means do. Of course, if you don't. This is a weird time that we're entering, and we have a story from the New York Times about a federal document that basically talks about multiple different scenarios, and that in some instances, the best case scenario is that, we're going to be dealing with this for an extended period of time. This is not going to be a 2 or 3 week thing. South Korea went one way. We were 8 weeks behind, or 6 weeks behind. I mean, really, the president responding, and we're going to play stuff. I mean, it is, at one time, it's going to be really important to understand why this could be as devastating as it's going to be. And I think there's a lot of different factors involved in it, but we'll talk more about that later in the program. I should say, you're spending a lot of time in your home these days, and you're fixing it up. You're trying to make it look good. Well, don't let it go to waste by not including gorgeous lighting. Lamps Plus has been upgrading homes for decades. As a leader in lighting innovation and product design expertise, discover exclusive styles and lighting for every room. Chandeliers, outdoor lights, ceiling fans. They got everything. They also have furnishings and decor to complete the perfect look. You can customize your lighting, too, with over 100 colors. They have videos with design tips, inspirational photos with latest trends. There's no reason to get lighting anywhere else. Lamps Plus is the nation's largest lighting retailer with over, you ready for this? 55,000 designs, all from top brands, including Minka. Minka, as you know, is known for decorative pieces that blend function and style using innovative materials. In fact, I should have brought up my Lamps Plus lamp right now. I've mentioned it before. Sort of like understated styling. But for me, as you can imagine, I like stuff that is very highly functional. And this has a USB plug at its base. I love it. And right now, Lamps Plus is offering up to 50% off hundreds of lights, furniture, and decor during the biggest sale of the season from now until March 30th. That's up to 50% during the Lamp Plus half-price days and sale through March 30th at lampsplus, PLUS.com/majority. Start saving today at lampsplus.com/majority. What are we going to do here? Oh, okay. I'm going to take a quick break and try and remember how I do this. We're going to do this. Be right back. And this. And I will be right back. I haven't quite figured out how to play music from here. But we'll work on that. All right, right back after this. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program Washington Post political correspondent Dave Weigel. Dave, how are you? Where are you right now?
I'm good, although as a big Stephen King fan, I'm worried that going on a radio station means a team of shock troops will break in and take it over. I mean, that's usually what happens in a pandemic. That's my only frame of reference is the Stand, basically. Other than that, I'm good.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, exactly. It is very strange times, and I think we're just at the the beginning of it, I guess. And well, gosh, it's really your whole plan of covering this political primary seems to be a little bit altered.
Yeah, I'm the real victim here. Just want to make that clear. Everything's fine, except I am no longer going to be, for a little while, or a long while, no longer zipping around the country to cover these races, because these races are, if sanity prevails, mostly going to be conducted via mail with no campaigning. So with some digital campaigning. So there's new stuff to cover, but the world of, waking up at 4 a.m. in order to get on a flight between two businessmen who want to become best friends, that's over for now. So my last trip was to Illinois. I got back here Monday morning. I wrote about the Newman primary in the 3rd House District, and that turned out to be a good story, right? But that was it.
All right, you're breaking up just a little bit. But so now let's I guess let's go over what's happening last night. Maybe we can have a little bit more of a meta conversation too, because so much of what I have appreciated about your reporting over the years, particularly in terms of politics, is you're out there, you're talking to voters, and in my experience, over, I don't know, I mean, I've been reading you in one form or another, whether it's like on email lists or your email blast or you're in the Washington Post or frankly in other publications. You always seem to have a very good sense of what's happening on the ground. I imagine that is going to change. But before we get there, let's talk about what happened last night. There was supposed to be 4 primaries. There was 3. I want to talk about Ohio in a second because that's going to have implications, down the road. But I was, to be honest with you, I was surprised by the results in some of these primaries. Not the least of which the turnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was watching that closely because it's one of the new factors we just didn't have reference for. So I was, again, in Illinois over the weekend in the Chicago area talking to Marie Newman and other candidates, and they had no idea what was going to happen to turnout. Newman's theory, she's the progressive who beat Dan Lipinski, was her voters were more likely to turn out. They were more intense. Lipinski was relying on Republican voters to just come out for fun and cross over and vote for him. And she was correct. She was basically on just pure instinct, but she was correct. Turnout in that race was up over 2018, over the midterm, a little bit, and she won. However, turnout across the state was down about 20, 25% since the last primary, and turnout was up in Arizona and Florida. But the context is super important here because knock on wood, hand to God, pick your cliche. Luckily, the states that voted yesterday have robust early voting, but Arizona and Florida, which are very old, if you haven't seen a 90 stand-up routine in a while, lots of old people there, God's waiting room. They have really picked up early voting. I mean, they have elections where more than half the vote is cast by people showing up to these precincts beforehand, getting mail ballots, etc. Like California, they had the same kind of pattern. And those states, Arizona and Florida, turnout was up from 16. Turnout was down in Illinois, which has early voting, but not quite the same tradition. It's still a, hey, everybody, the machine told you to come out and vote Tuesday, state. So turnout was down there in, I think, not down in a way that affected the outcome. I mean, maybe it shifted 1 or 2 delegates over there, but really the only data we have on this is that it was Joe Biden voters, not voters, who are more likely to be worried about the virus. They skew older. The turnout was suppressed by the virus a little bit. I think enough that we're not going to have another primary. I mean, we've got 3 months left. Probably not another primary unless there is a miraculous recovery from this virus that will be held mostly in person, mail, depending on how efficiently states.
All right, I'm sorry, Dave, you're breaking up a little bit. Did you just say that you don't anticipate any more in-person primaries, barring any type of like a miracle, and that you think they will happen, but they'll all be by mail? Dave, I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, sorry, you're moving around a little bit.
I'm not the door. It's just working from home is fun.
Oh,
yes,
now
I think. Let me turn this off.
Dave is he's streaming. And
you hear me now?
Yeah, that sounds great.
You hear me now?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's still stuff that we have to report out, but in the Senate, its House, to just say, okay, we know how mail ballots work. We need to make more of them. We can cut through this problem. I mean, that's something that Oregon and Washington do to great effect. They've done it for years. There is a path to doing this. It is complicated. It might take longer to count stuff, but I think that is where we're heading. The only note of caution, I mean, I noticed Republicans were kind of giddily celebrating some election results in Pennsylvania yesterday where turnout was way down for all the reasons we discussed. Pennsylvania is a state that only has election day voting, no early voting, where absentee voting is uncommon. And so that's one I would watch, where if Republicans in the legislature actually move to make the primary mail, or if they see an advantage in not doing it. I don't know. I just know that they were the tone they had was, I'd say, the least elegiac tone of anybody.
No, wait a second.
I mean, the Biden campaign and the Sanders campaign were sort of saying, well, it was complicated. Republicans were like, yeah, we beat them. So they won one seat. Now it was Republican hell, but they won one seat that Hillary Clinton had carried in 2016. So they kind of just spiked the football.
Wait a second. I'm sorry. So explain to me again what you're talking about. There was a race in Pennsylvania yesterday.
Right. Oh yeah. So there were some special elections in Pennsylvania for legislative seats, for House seats, and Republicans did pretty well, and they just kind of celebrated that they did well. They were not saying there was no. So I'm not trying to put too much stock in this. I'm saying this is moving very fast. It's up to the states to change these elections to ones more people can participate in from home. But in a state that has really bad participation rules, I mean, you need to show up in person on election day. Republicans are kind of happy that they won. So I keep an eye on Pennsylvania. That's one of those states where you've got a Republican legislature and Democratic governor, and let's see if they can agree on this. It's a mess. I mean, I think you're going to see some blue states that are yet to vote, like New York, like Connecticut, like Rhode Island. They might be a little bit more spring in the step of those legislators to just figure this out fast, because they've got until April, which feels like a long time, isn't really.
Well, yeah, it's not that long. A couple of weeks away, and people are still in the process. My guess is that people are still in the process of sort of like establishing a work routine, or contemplating what it's going to be.
Absolutely, and it's hard for people to process how their lives are going to change like this. I mean, I'm currently working from my house. There are people, their cars parked. There are folks working out in the field.
You got really bad reception at your house too. You're gonna have
to
to work on.
I set this up perfectly, where I have both a computer that needs to be repaired, Wi-Fi that does not actually work very well in the house, bad reception. It's a good stuff.
The romantic life of the political reporter on the road, where you let everything at home go to pieces. Apparently, not necessarily the best way to prepare for a pandemic, is what you're saying. Now, so
arguably, yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the results. In all those races, the turnout. I guess. Well, I mean, I guess I guess I'm encouraged that there was high turnout in these states. Right. And like you say, they were early vote states. Sanders got pretty well beat in all of these states.
He did. I mean, he's one data point that I was putting together this morning was that he's not just lost the vote, because let's be fair, maybe some people stayed home yesterday that would have otherwise voted. But when it comes to delegates, of the states that have already voted so far, he won 1,092 delegates last time. So they were held on different days, like California went last. But he won more than 1,000 delegates from this pool of states. And so far this year, we have to allocate probably 100 more delegates from the California other states. But he's won about 737 so far. So best case scenario, he's already about 200 delegates down from where he was last time. And he's not on a track to win. I mean, the states that are coming up, he, again, lost that pool of states because he lost New York, he lost Pennsylvania, he lost Connecticut, he lost Maryland. He lost a lot of big states that are still on the calendar, and he did better in states. Well, Wisconsin's the best, and Indiana are the best big primary states coming up for him. But there's caucuses he did well in that are gone now. They're in race with primaries. I mean, he basically has a really grim couple of months ahead if he keeps running for president. And the question becomes, I mean, frankly, we as voters got used to primaries going on for a while. And the idea, and you saw this from kind of Nina Turner and other Bernie people over the last day, the idea that voters deserve a choice. But primaries are weird, and they, you remember, you and I remember 2004 when John Kerry basically has the thing wrapped up by the end of February.
Yep.
In that race, California didn't have a choice per se. The race was over by the time they had to vote. But that is like the norm that we got past because of these long primaries. And I think the Sanders campaign is adjusting. There's what they say versus what their supporters say online. For supporters online, I think there's still there's less of a hope that voters will change their minds and more that Biden will melt down. So Sanders should stay in the race for that reason. And, that's getting a little bit more out loud and explicit. But it doesn't change the fact that Sanders is doing much worse than he did last time.
Right. And it seems to me that, that you suspend, people suspend their campaign for that last scenario you're talking about. And in that instance, he's going to have the plurality of delegates, or at least the majority of delegates that have not been taken up. And I don't know how how one would work that out. But
Biden's on track to have a majority of delegates, and if stuff wasn't delayed, we had Ohio yesterday. If we had Puerto Rico and Indiana this month, he'd probably clinch the majority of delegates. If nothing changed, he kept winning the same demographics, probably clinch it early May.
Right. So
after Kentucky votes, he was on track to do that. So he was going to get a majority. The whole broker convention thing is that's not going to happen.
Right. And he's got about 1,200 delegates at this point?
Yeah. So everyone counts them differently, which makes frankly, something I always think about this process is anything that's complicated can look like the party is trying to pull a fast one.
Right.
But it's just that this is a messy system where each state has its own election process. Some of them have terrible, clunky ones. Some of them have very smooth ones, like Minnesota. Singling them out for praise. They're always good at this. And so it takes a while for there to be like a verified vote count. And then when the vote count's verified, the party says, okay, here's how the delegates went this way, according to each congressional district. And this is the risk that, frankly, the party seems to be avoiding if it's a Biden victory. That if this was still like a 50-50 race or a 5-candidate race, and campaigns were pushing to June, there literally wouldn't be enough time for people to vote and have those votes allocated for delegates, because the convention would be a couple weeks later.
I can only imagine if we had still 6-7 people in the race, right? Like, it would have been nuts. And just remind people, all the delegates, according to the DNC rules, which of course you could waive in this instance, need to be in by June. We have
June 7th is the key date. Yeah.
So, give me your sense. Like you say, like there is a. I don't feel like there's necessarily mixed messages coming out of the Sanders campaign as to what they're going to do, but it does sort of feel like there is sort of, there's not full-throated messages coming out. Is that a fair assessment?
That's fair to say. So the campaigns don't need to tell you everything they're thinking. It'd be awesome if they did. But you can tell from the tone they're taking, how they're looking at the race. Sanders did not mention the primaries at all in his address last night. His campaign only said that he was reassessing his campaign today. They emerged to knock down this false report that he was suspending. He's not suspending right now. But that's all they clarified. Not it's on to Alaska and Hawaii and let's win this thing. It was we're looking at the campaign, talking to supporters, things of that nature. And so it is the way you would talk as if you're wrapping this up. The problem is that, one, he's losing, but a problem for him going into the rest of the primaries is that he indeed has very well thought out policies, even if you think they're too expensive. He has as his address last night showed, he's not really interested in just the here's how we're going to get through this as a country,
right.
Pat on the back speech. He sees a role for himself as a candidate or a politician with a lot of name recognition and a lot of clout, proposing big ideas that would restructure the economy. And what happens to that if he drops out of the race? What happens if he does not get more delegates and he's just got a pool? Right now he's on track to have about a quarter. If he drops, he maybe gets a quarter of delegates less. Not really a strong negotiating hand. So he is. I think the question for him, from the people around him I've talked to, is he's probably not going to win. What does he do that, one, gets his voice the most volume, and elects Joe Biden, because he he has a lot of supporters, and you can see them all on Twitter if you want. I don't know why you want to do that to yourself. Who are already saying, and give him some days to deal with this. I mean, if he's losing, somebody might say they're 100% not going to vote for Biden today and vote for him later. But they're all saying, I was screwed.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my sense is, well, first off, like with the classic caveat that, Twitter, I think, can seem like it represents more people than it does. But with that said, like, and this is, I did Chris Hayes's program again, at midnight when they let people on who are sympathetic to Sanders on that network, and I did it from here, which was an odd sensation. But I guess one thing that people forget is Joe Biden, and you correct me if I'm wrong here with this. The vast amount of exit polling showed that people were not voting on a set of policies, that they were voting. They were willing to say, like, in fact, I'm not even voting based upon who I agree with. I'm voting on the person who I think can win. And I think everybody saw that it wasn't until Clyburn said, I think Joe Biden can win, that he did well, that he went back up in South Carolina. And it wasn't until the entire field, essentially, of candidates, short of Marianne Williamson, backed him, that people got that, were basically told, like, oh, the professionals say that Joe Biden's the guy who can win. All right, he was vice president. I buy it. Sanders, it seems to me, was the only candidate in the race, is the only candidate in the race, but also was the only one who was attracting voters, or I should say, the one who was attracting voters who were voting for him because of what he was, what he was advocating. And in terms of the raw numbers, right? I mean, there was really nobody close to him in that regard. And I would put Joe Biden in that, in that as well. Sanders, maybe we're only talking about 25, 30% support, depending, across the board, a little bit more actually, if you look at it in terms of delegates, right? But the vast majority of people who are voting for him were doing so because they were aligned with his sort of proposals and perspective on how we should be governed. And that has different implications than, like, how does Pete Buttigieg get out of the race?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think you're right. It has not been ideological, and I think it's wrapped in a way that has been helpful to Biden. I mean, in a really grim sense, the premise of the Sanders campaign and the Warren campaign, to an extent, they're different in ways they don't go through. Is that, yes, Trump is president. That's because of things that went terribly wrong for decades, and that we need a president to completely undo and rethink as he expands the welfare state. The premise of the Biden campaign is we basically were on the right track under Barack Obama. Things were going well. We need to get rid of this president and then build on what we were doing. And build on can mean expanding things, but not really rethinking things completely. Even gun laws are basically, let's go back to what we had in the 90s. So the Biden premise was not as exciting, did not appeal to young people. I think especially to people under 40 who have, I'm one of them kind of, I've lived through 9/11 and a financial crash and a pandemic, and it does not seem, if you look at the young people joining up political parties, all this, there's just a lot of skepticism about the political class. However, it's just kind of objectively true that when Biden was vice president, his former chief of staff led this Ebola response that was effective, even though conservatives thought it would not be, and that they put in place a pandemic relief network. And so he has the story that I think was most compelling for primary voters at this moment. It was already pretty compelling, and now it's basically, well, yes, it's the choices between let's try some new stuff and let's go back to what let us not live in our houses, afraid to go out, literally, then let's go to that. But again, if you're Sanders, the worry you have about Biden is that he is not by nature a big picture politician. He is a let's come together and fix this guy. you don't have, if you're Sanders, any control over what he says. You've just been running against him, but you might have some worry that he's going to get outflanked by the president. And let's look at the cash payments as an example. It was Ro Khanna, a co-chair of the Sanders campaign, and Tim Ryan, who's endorsed Biden. They introduced legislation a week ago for immediate cash payments to people to get them through the pandemic. Democratic leadership in the House, Nancy Pelosi, was kind of namby-pamby about it, worried about it, because they've just got scar tissue that a lot of young people don't have, which is, oh no, we'll be accused of being too spendthrift on big things. You had the president embrace a version of that, and so I think the worry for Biden critics is, okay, the guy might be winning, but is he adept, adroit, sharp enough to compete with Trump? And you're kind of arguing from a position of weakness. This guy was definitely adept enough to beat Bernie Sanders by bigger margins than Hillary Clinton did.
Yes, I mean, but let me put a little more meat on those bones, because to the extent that he has a blind side, Biden does, and he's, to use a basketball metaphor, I can go pretty strong to my right, but I'm not so good on my left. And I think Joe Biden has that same problem, not so much in basketball. I'm not sure he could do right or left, but his left, in terms of going left, is a little bit weak. And Donald Trump, I think, part of the fear that people have had is that Donald Trump is going to outflank him on the left. Now, I think I think everything that's going on and what's going to happen with the economy is going, I don't even think, it's almost like we can't even have this conversation pricing that in, because, 3 days from now, it could be dramatically different. I mean, just based upon the pace of things that are going. I guess you've seen Sanders make during the debate, and I imagine that on some level, they on this campaign are still sort of like, and Sanders is sort of contemplating this, is that even if we could, even if there was a full desire by everybody to go back to a time, and there was a time where without Donald Trump, everything was fine. It's quite possible at the end of this coronavirus thing that does not exist anymore, right? Like that a prolonged, deep recession. I mean, we're already talking, Mnuchin's out there saying that 20% of the people could lose their jobs. The Great Depression was 25%. And if you got Mnuchin saying this at this point, we just don't know. And so at the end of this, there's going to be something, it's one thing to say, we're going to go back and sort of take the stain off of the city and, pull down the banners that this guy put up and the murals. It's another to say oh my God, all the buildings have been destroyed. We're going to have to we're going to have to rebuild this. Not totally. The infrastructure is still going to be there on some level, but we're going to have to rebuild this from, ground floor. And
right.
And we also know that Joe Biden, when he did sort of, not so much in the debate, but in the past, admit that he was, for cutting Social Security, what was the reason? It was because of deficits. What kind of deficits? If you are susceptible to deficit pressure, what's it going to look like if you become president, in January 21st, 2021? Yeah. I mean,
well, you can tell with the brio that Sanders has as he talks about this stuff, because you and I lived through the Tea Party, and the first organizing by the Koch groups and all that around the Tea Party was there is a economic crisis that's driving unemployment above 10%. The Democratic president wants to spend stimulus money to fix that, and the Tea Party said no, the government spent too much money. It doesn't take a huge imagination, certainly smaller ones that take still the pandemic, to imagine, it's February 2021. President Biden is trying to pass basically the same stimulus package that President Trump is, and there's another uprising of people saying no, they're the Democrats again. And so that's the worry: is does Joe Biden have the antibodies to deal with that? Because in the past, in the 90s. And I should say that there's that 1995 video that Sanders used in his campaign ads of Biden's talking about Social Security, he was in cycle. He was on the ballot in 1996, and Delaware was still a swing state. I'm not saying, and he was right to do that. I'm just saying his politics were, I want to get reelected politics. So if you have Joe Biden,
you don't even have to go back to there.
On the left, how do you prevent him from getting in there and making Obama's mistakes? And that's a big question. Do you do it by continuing to run against him, or do you do it by, what seems like in a very soft way Elizabeth Warren is doing, which is saying, all right, I'm off the field. Let's talk. Here's a bunch of stuff you should do that would make you more popular. I think that's those are the only options left if Biden could be the nominee.
And I would add that there's another layer of complexity to it, because I think you're right. I think Warren is trying to do that in a sort of a softer way.
Yeah.
But there's another layer of complexity here, because by the time Warren left the race, her voters were disappointed, but there was the disappointment seemed to me to be more about Elizabeth Warren is a very adept politician and administrator and executive, et cetera, and we're going to lose out on that, as opposed to, I think, Sanders' support is more attached to specific policy measures, right? I think with Elizabeth Warren, it was like, she's got a plan. What's the plan? Well, I trust her. It doesn't matter. I'm sure it's good.
Well, she did have them. She and Sanders both have pretty comprehensive coronavirus plans.
Absolutely.
That are trying,
but my point is,
part of the crisis, to build a bunch of new platforms into the system, so that, okay, well, things go bad again, we got this trigger for unemployment, we got this trigger for student loans, et cetera, et cetera.
Without a doubt. I guess my point is that I think that Warren's support was more a function of what people thought that she could do, and Sanders' support is more a function of the things, right, that they perceived would come with that. And so on some level, Biden, I don't know if people will fully trust Biden, this and that, but it seems to me that Biden needs to, he adopted Elizabeth Warren's bankruptcy plan. It's not like it didn't appear that he had a terribly depth in terms of knowing what it was. But I think it was like signaling, like, hey, I'm embracing Warren. But I don't think that same dynamic will satisfy some segment of Bernie voters, and maybe ones that you and I never even come in contact with, or maybe you did on the trail, but they're not on Twitter. Yeah. They're not. They are just like, and maybe they can't even articulate necessarily the specifics of the plan, but that they were more interested in, like, sort of like what those material benefits could be. And we could be talking about a very small slice of people, but that's all it took in 2016.
The model here, if you're on the left, is honestly what the right did with Donald Trump, which was Donald Trump wanted to be president for. He had a lot of agenda items that the Republican Party didn't share. He had some they did, but he didn't really fill in a lot of his thinking on abortion, on judges. He had a record that was kind of all over the place, and so what the right did with Trump said, okay, you need us to win. Here is a list of judges you're going to appoint. Here's who you should be making your undersecretaries. To the point where now it's basically just like a pipeline from conservative organizations to the White House. I think that is, now the left does not have that. It's been trying to build that, something that robust for years. And frankly, some of the stuff on the left that fits that bill, like the Center for American Progress, people who vote for Sanders don't like or trust it or consider it liberal. But that is the model. I think if you're on the left and you want to shape Biden, it's basically, okay, you're going to get the presidency. Let's make sure you do not choose like a deficit hawk, bland running mate. I'm not thinking of anyone particular here, but both people. Well, he said he'll choose a woman, so not rule out people to judge. Amy Klobuchar did say at points that the Democrats need to be taken, more seriously on the deficit, be the party reduction. You got a couple months where this candidate who did not expect to win like this fast has not scaled up to kind of fill it in. I think you can be despondent about it. I've seen some people on Twitter just saying, "Oh well, it's Biden. He's never going to listen to any of the progressive ideas." And he look at Trump and say, if you personnel is policy, and if you get like Elizabeth Warren's list of versus the Biden campaign's list, then you have a more progressive presidency than Obama. But people are understandably despondent because what it looked like could happen even a month ago was the Bernie Sanders brain trust taking over the presidency.
Yep.
And the entire old order being swept away, and that's just not what people voted for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how you can argue against that. I mean, and there, I think it's unfortunate, and but it is what it is. And the question is how much. And I think the analogy with Trump is apt because I think in many respects, Biden at this point is a bit of a cipher. I mean, I think that he had sort of standard issue politics, and I think he was certainly out in the forefront of trying to cut Social Security during the Obama administration, right? I mean, and he certainly went behind Harry Reid's back to make deals and empower Mitch McConnell. I don't have a sense that he, learned some type of grand lesson from that. I don't, frankly, anticipate that, a guy Biden's age or Bernie's age, for that matter, are going to learn, new tricks, as it were. But I also do think that there is a bit of a vacuum that Biden, creates, because I just don't see this guy as vigorously like, I'm finally going to get to institute the blankety blank that I've been thinking about for, 40 years in government. He doesn't have one of those.
No, I mean, when he released, I remember his climate plan, a lot of green groups were pleasantly surprised. But then the more activists will Sunrise were like, okay, but this is less ambitious than Bernie. And also, who wrote this and where did it come from? It was a lot of caveat emptor because it wasn't like, what is the assurance? And I think this is where the Obama experience burns people. Obama came in during a crisis and appointed the people who said, we're the crisis fixers. We just happen to be associated with neoliberal ideas that you didn't run on. So that's the worry, is people fear a repeat of that. And what is the best way to mobilize against that? It's a big question, but it's not a silly question. I mean, because you do see the chatter from people who are worried, and the specific worry is this, right? I don't think I'm misstating it, is that Biden would win and then because he didn't deliver on some many priorities, he'd be wiped out in one term by a more conservative Republican than Trump, who's better at this.
I mean,
that's the worry. But I mean,
Tom Cotton
he doesn't want to lose either, so who knows what he does.
Tom Cotton was on, was on Fox again, sort of like criticizing the Democratic bill that came out. I guess it was maybe phase 2 or whatever. They've now passed 2 bills, and criticizing it from the left, on the specifics of the economics. And so that's a real danger. And it's really a question now. And the other thing I think that that worries folks is like, where's Joe Biden gotten all his money? He's gotten it from those same type of like folks who came in and told Obama how to fix things, and invariably they all it would be like me consulting with Biden and going like, well, here's the key to the economy: YouTube shows. You've got to give a lot of subsidies to YouTube shows, and that's and that's I've been working in YouTube for a long, I would say radio and YouTube. That's the most important thing that you can do for the economy. Well, all right, so let me ask you this. Specifically the question of people who are like, Bernie's got to get out because, it's going to hurt the general election. Like, I understand why people sort of say that in a knee-jerk fashion, but it does not appear to me that Bernie is pursuing any of the critiques at this point, and he didn't in the last debate, that could be weaponized by Donald Trump, and that I'm just not clear. It's one thing. It's like, we don't want to have to spend resources in going to New York State and to going to whatever, to Pennsylvania and this and that. Well, I mean, who's expending resources now, right? Like, I mean, you can
Well,
run
yeah.
ads, and Biden's been able to do it without ads. Like, I'm not clear that this inhibits. There's an ounce of inhibition in terms of Biden if he's ultimately the nominee, which I think it's a pretty good strong sense that he will be. If that in any way inhibits the race against Trump, and frankly, I'm like, if you figure out a way of integrating the stuff that Bernie ran on, at least to some extent, not because, Bernie deserves it or something like this, but because you want to win in the fall and you want to bring the energy of these people along with you. That to me seems like the only option if you want a net gain going to the general.
Yeah, and this is what Warren was trying to do, not just on the way out, but when she was persistently facing electability questions, he would say, look, I mean, in addition to me wanting to pass a wealth tax, it's like 70%. And it's wealth tax is pretty clear. It's not like Medicare for all, or I do think there's like some wiggle room, or people think Medicare for all means that they just go on their grandparents' Medicare and don't pay any more taxes. Like, leaving that aside, there are ideas that are very popular that Joe Biden has not embraced, and he has. I mean, if you're on the left and you want to be moving him, he moved the Hyde Amendment in about 48 hours. He confronted ACLU volunteers the Hyde Amendment on banning the use of taxpayer funds for Medicaid for abortions, and then got some pressure and backed down. And he has been showing just this unusual willingness to back off positions he's had for a while, not in the Pete Buttigieg way where he's like a stem cell just adopting to whatever seems to be working at the moment, but in somebody saying, well, after 50 years in politics, I agree that I was wrong for 49 of those years. So it's a big question. Where else can you put, if you're on the left, where else can you push him, and how do you do it? Because no one likes to be told how to behave online, and I think a lot of the attacks on kind of left Twitter and dirtbag Twitter have been not in the best faith. Hey, you're making me feel bad, therefore, but it's a question you have to deal with. Obviously there are some people who are never ever going to suck up to Biden, never going to meet him, never be part of that establishment. There are going to be people who threaten to stay home, to vote green. The usual, basically, of writing it off and saying there's no point anymore. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton was very worried about those voters. She adapted by taking on Sanders' health care plan and abandoning the TPP. So she changed in what was a weaker position than Biden, but she had a bigger edifice of supporters. I mean, but she had collected for 40 years this network of people who were going to be, everyone knew who was going to be in the Clinton administration if she won. We have some ideas of who's going to be in the Biden administration, but the opportunity there is that, he's got all these kind of policy TBD slots or cabinet member, secretary TBD positions. And if you run in and fill them, how do you convince them that you're the person to fill them? One thing that I think people will do is say, like, look, I don't like Trump. Convinced me to vote in Florida for this guy because it doesn't sound like either president's going to wipe the way. That's an issue I bring up because Biden doesn't seem to be bending on that. He does seem to be part of the
I'm sorry. Say that issue again, because you broke up on
student loans.
Right.
The promise of getting them all forgiven, student debt forgiven, was probably dead with the Sanders campaign. But can Biden be moved on that? That's an issue I'd look to, because he has this sort of let's worry about the budget. Let's worry about the budget. Let's forgive debt only for people who do service, et cetera. If you can push him during this crisis, when I think there already is pressure to stop forcing loan payments as long as people might not be at work. Where can you move him? And you'll find out pretty soon if he's religiously attached to this sort of fiscal discipline, or if he can be moved. And we're going to find out, week by week.
It's interesting because you were saying earlier that you were breaking up just a little bit, but you were saying earlier that it took like 15 minutes worth of pressure, and Biden basically reversed himself on the Hyde Amendment vote. And I do think there is a quality about Biden, and and let me reiterate, I just don't know that the guy believes that strongly in anything. I think that he has this muscle memory where it's like, wait a second, forgive a loan. I represented the credit
I
card.
think that's very true.
I represented the credit cards and the banking industry for my entire career. Everything I know about loans is you do not forgive loans. Like you never let the debtor off the hook. It's always the creditors. It's always you never let the debtor off the hook. And I think that is like I almost think that like he could be, semi-conscious and would still veto a bill about that. But everything else, I think he's just sort of like, I don't know. There's a quality of like Chris Matthews, sign off to Joe Biden, which is like, I have no idea what's going on around me here. I have a vague sense if I was wrong about a lot of stuff for the past 40 years. And, okay. But the other problem is like, who's going to be standing next to him saying, okay, yeah, you're right. You were wrong about all that, but this is what you should do next.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of that, and I don't know what the best tone is to work on Biden people. But like, this is a campaign that, in the midst of winning the primaries, hired a new campaign manager. I mean, this is a campaign that I think did look at what had happened, and you see a little bit of kind of mouthiness and gloating on Twitter. Like, the campaign was retweeting all these Biden's dead takes after Super Tuesday. The campaign, spokes folks on Twitter, but this is a campaign that also realized it was getting blown out. And James Clyburn told them they were doing things wrong. They had a bad strategy as part of his conversation with Biden, and he won out. So they've restructured the campaign, hired somebody Jennifer Malley Dillon, who's running Beto's campaign. Everyone will kind of chuckle and say, Beto didn't win. It's like, a lot of people don't win. It doesn't mean that the staff was incompetent. Right. I think even people who were happy that Elizabeth Warren lost looked at what some of her team did in terms of raising money and all that, and they wouldn't say, never hire them again. So Biden's already shown that he knows his campaign needs to get adjusted. I think he can get very cocky. That's where he's been in some of these one-on-one confrontations with voters. And he does seem to be curtailing that instinct a little bit when it comes to the campaign staff. So who knows what would happen with the higher level policy decisions.
All right. Well, so right now we don't really know what's happening going forward, right? We have these different different primaries that have basically punted a little bit, and we're anticipating vote by mail. So just give me just like just a quick wrap up at this point. Like, what are you going to be reporting on this sort of like the new innovations of how you campaign via with all your campaign staff theoretically staying at home? I mean, I imagine if I was working on the Biden campaign, I would have a whole team that's just there with like taking everybody's temperature if they get within 10 feet of Biden. I mean, I don't mean to be flip about this, but like, there are predictions that 60% of the population is going to get this, and he's not well situated to get it. Nor, same with Sanders for that matter.
No, completely. And neither of them is going to do in-person campaigning for a while. Traditional political rallies, things of that nature are suspended for a while. There's not actually,
and they're not sending out canvassers either, are they?
No, neither campaign. So when I was in Illinois, the campaigns had transitioned to say, call people at home, don't go out in person and canvass, with some success. I mean, in Marie Newman's case, that was successful. She turned out her base with phone calls and convinced a lot of people to vote early. So
that's a huge.
What I'm going to cover is, I think, frankly, kind of a flashback to campaigning around 1900, where there were political parties and they spent money, and there were candidates and they gave speeches, but they did not do a lot of in-person campaigning. You might see the image of Joe Biden speaking to you from Wilmington, Delaware, from time to time for the next couple of weeks, or from Washington, in settings with not many people in them. And that is, frankly, I think, based on the way this campaign's gone, that is good for him. I'm not trying to say, because he needs he needs the safety net because he'll make mistakes. I'm saying he was not a guy who drew out gigantic crowds. The president is a candidate who needs those crowds to build his base and can't do it. I mean, left out of this whole conversation is the president was, remember, he was doing this before each of the primaries until Michigan, making sure he could rally right the night before with maximum attention. And they would take the names of people who came in, they would contact them. Even if you signed up for a Trump rally and you didn't show up, which lots of people did, tens of thousands of people would do, they would collect your information and
you've broken up. But what you were basically saying...
That's a campaign that helps Biden more than Trump.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it helps Biden, and I think it hurts Trump in this regard. Yeah. All right, so lastly, tell us about the Lipinski race, because this is a big race. Justice Dems, if I remember correctly, the Justice Dems was really poo-pooed by folks who were supporting Lipinski. This is not, the only race that reminds me of was like Cuellar and Cisneros, and Cisneros came up short. That did not happen in Illinois last night, and Lipinski is just like, he was almost like a parody of a bad Democrat.
He was, and he also got very cocky. So Lipinski, he inherited his seat from his father, literally. His father was William Lipinski, longtime congressman, Chicago political player, retired. Without getting the weeds, the switcheroo where you can retire when it's too late for anyone else to come on the ballot to replace you. He did that. So he basically gave the seat to his son. His son withstood several primary challenges, and his savior was always voters. Lower information voters would come out and say, "Oh, my congressman, okay," and vote for him, unaware that he was very conservative. So he narrowly beat Newman by 2 points in 2018. I think that gave a lot of false confidence to Democrats, like, "Oh, no one, if he can survive, anyone can survive," and they just kind of slept on Ocasio-Cortez. In the run-up to this, he just did not behave like a candidate who was trying to win Democrats anymore. He had a strategy that I think was actually undone by Trump, because Trump was trying to encourage Republicans to vote in the Republican primary. So in Illinois, there's no party registration. You show up and say, "I want a red ballot" or "I want a blue ballot." And in 2018, a lot of Republicans came out to vote for Lipinski and saved him. This year, turnout was up overall. Slightly up. Newman's vote was up by more, and he didn't deliver. He just collapsed in.
Oh, we lost you again.
Suburbs. The rest of the district is suburbs, and he lost badly there. And so he just kept casting conservative votes, spoke at the March for Life, made these decisions that just were advertising the reasons why Democrats would want to vote against.
Right. And there was one other race that was slated to happen that was sort of similar, and that was the Morgan Harper, and I can't remember who she was challenging, but in Ohio. Joyce Beatty, yeah, in Ohio. And I guess we're going to have to wait on that. I mean, if that's by mail-in, who does that help? Do you have a sense?
If it's by mail-in, I think it does help. I don't know, because I was in Illinois, but I wouldn't have been surprised if Lipinski won yesterday because of people nervous about coming out. In a mail ballot situation, I think with nothing else on there, I mean, there's an opportunity for the left to really prioritize that race and to contact people in the district. But yeah, I think in general, when left-wing candidates aren't able to go out and campaign and canvass, it is going to be harmful to them. So Morgan Harper probably did pretty well, and all the votes that have been cast in Ohio, Georgia, et cetera, so far, they're just kind of waiting to be counted when the election's over. Probably did okay in those, but it's a real question, and that I think is a big question for the left going forward. Is that if there's not really a point to the Sanders campaign beyond getting delegates to sit in the committee room in Milwaukee, what are their next priorities? And the situation has bought some time if you want to go focus on some down ballot races.
Right. Very important. Dave Weigel, real pleasure. Thank you so much, man. And good luck with your Wi-Fi.
All right, stay. It's obviously pretty terrible, but I'll live. All right, stay safe.
All right, you
Thanks.
too. Bye-bye. Dave Weigel, everybody. Boom, boom. There he goes. Thank you for your indulgence on his connection. We are a lot of times in that situation. We have backup plans, and he would have been at the office, et cetera, and but always has a very educated perspective on these things. Not literally an education. I don't know. I mean, I presume he went. I don't know, but he's actually gone out and done the work, and he really does have a very good sense of these things. And he started in not full-on right-wing media, but sort of adjacent there. So his perspective, he's pretty open and pretty good about being able to talk to a whole range of people and in assessing where they're at. Folks, we've got a couple of things that we're working on in terms of the tech that's going to sort of like open this up and bring in, Matt and Brendan and Jamie and sometimes Michael. And it's going to take us a couple of days to get this set up. And Mike from PA offered on Twitter or an email to help me with, OBS, and different people are reaching out. And so we will get there. Really appreciate your patience. On Thursdays now, it used to be Thursdays, Michael would do the show. We're not really sort of set up to be able to do that now. And I don't know. I'll talk to Michael about it. But I think probably what will happen is I may just devote Thursdays to taking calls, maybe playing some clips, some video clips. I don't know yet. I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do. But we will see. I don't know. We'll figure it out this afternoon. Tomorrow may be different than other Thursdays. Maybe we'll run a pre-tape, or maybe we'll just do a couple of things at the beginning because as I get the notion that we've got to settle in here, I've got to make sure that my kids are. Right now we have my 14-year-old is now a teacher of my 7-year-old. And oddly enough, their fighting is not stopping when they're in the classroom. So just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. Our advertising, I think we're going to start to see a drop off, frankly. Not terribly surprising. I think we're going to see it drop off on YouTube in terms of advertising. I've seen a little bit of hints of that. I think we're going to see it in terms of the live reads. Hopefully, some of them have been locked in, but we will see about that. We have a lot of members who are under financial stress now, and tomorrow, hopefully, is a day where I'll be able to, hook up those people who have canceled. If you need to cancel, you can cancel and send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Cancel and send us an email saying, like, I had to cancel, but would like access, and we'll take care of you. It's, have a little bit of patience, and we'll get there. We will not lock anybody out for financial reasons. If you are somebody who does not have, any type of financial stress because of what's going on, you were already working at home, or maybe you're in the hand sanitizer business or whatever it is, and you enjoy the show and you're able to support it, much appreciated. We're going to be here. We're going to get better at doing this in this way. Maybe I'll interview my kids, but we'll come up with a couple other stuff that we can do, some fun stuff. So join themajorityreport.com. It's where you go to support the show. You can do a one-off donation, or you can sign up. Also, listen to the AM Quickie. Gives you your news in the morning. Just 6-7 minutes. Good way to get up, have a little bit of coffee, putting it out every morning at 8 a.m., so it'll be there when you wake up. And support that show if you can. Also, don't forget TMBS happened last night. I don't know why I'm looking at my IMs as if Matt's going to nod back to me, but TMBS Michael Brooks Show happened last night. You can check that out at patreon.com/TMBS. Emma Vigeland was on. You can see it on YouTube at youtube.com Michael Brooks Show. And also check out Nomiki Kant's show. The Nomiki Show is available at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. And she's also, I think she's getting on a lot on YouTube now. Everybody's sort of like, changing up their formats a little bit here and there. The Antifada still going. Soon we'll have technology where we can hear Jamie. She's probably talking to her computer right now. But you can go to patreon.com/The Antifada. And, of course, Literary Hangover, the YouTube and the Patreon. And I know Matt's got a bunch of stuff up. And Brendan apparently is not going to be doing any more live shows with his band. Means and Ways is on temporary hiatus. All right, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half. We've got a bunch of clips for you. And we'll talk about stuff. Like I'm still ramping up a little bit on being able to catch up on the number of stories that I want to catch up on. Talk about the various stimulus packages that are being planned. I mean, things are just moving so quickly that it is tough to keep track. And but we will endeavor to do so. Quick break, fun half. I'll be right back. So what I will do is hopefully you'll hear this. Let's see if this works. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
You feel like you are a dinosaur.
Good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some Americans out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready?
I think I might be nuts.
Agree.
No.
Okay.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird.
No way!
Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
all right, there we go. I'm back. I'm still just, I'm juggling these different things. My mic is back up. I think that should be, that sounds all right. Boom back. Oh, boom, back. You know, you're communicating over IM, and Matt wrote, bring yours up, and then he wrote, boom back. And I was like, boom back? What he meant to say was boom, exclamation point, back. So there it is. Let's go to the phones, because I really know how to do this. Calling from a 570 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. This is Dave from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Thanks for taking my call.
Dave?
Dave. Yes.
Dave.
Okay. I heard like 5 minutes of Rush the other day. He was saying the same talking points as the Pope of the Jews. Sanders is an atheist, campaigns with anti-Semites. He mentioned AOC and not Omar, which I thought was strange. Not supporting Israel and all the other lies. And Rush said every day on his show, he will say that Sanders is a commie, that Democrat socialist is not a thing, and the same old crap that he says. He did the same thing when it came to climate change, and let me read
a quote for you that I happen to have right here in front of my hands here.
Yes.
This is a quote from the Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient, Rush Limbaugh. This was on February 24th, 3 weeks ago. It looks like the coronavirus is being weaponized as yet another element to bring down Donald Trump. I'm dead right on this. The coronavirus is the common cold, folks. There it is. Of course, he is going on there and creating another. He's got to run so fast to create another boogeyman. They've got to. They've got to pull up. They have got to go run so hard right now, and I appreciate the phone call, Dave. They've got to run so hard. I want to get to this. I'm sorry, because this is just stunning. This is a compilation of Fox News over the past, I don't know, week or two. I'm actually gonna open this up a little bit and make it a little bit bigger so you can see the dates that are on it. I don't know if you're able to see it or not, but I'm going to open it up a little bit here so that you can. And it'll be over on top of me, but that's okay. Well, maybe I can't open that. Here we go. That's what I want to do. No, that's not what I want to do. That's what I want to do. Watch this video because and listen to the audio. Because it's stunning. What Fox News has done. And understand, obviously the president did this too, and they were just following the lead of the president. Those first 3 or 4 weeks, we will never, ever get them back. not just the time lapse, but that the ability to move quickly on something like this is everything. It's everything. You can look at it as like, whatever. You want to look at it as like a ripple, right? If you stop the rock from hitting the water, you've completely eliminated the ripple. If you have somehow been able to contain the ripple here, you could do it with your hand. But when these concentric circles just go out, and that is the way that this virus spreads, and then pretty soon it's covering the entire country before you have the ability to contain it. I mean, that's the thing, is that we were still doing containment as opposed to mitigation 3 weeks, 4 weeks after we were supposed to, because we never did the containment. Look at this compilation by I think it's from the Washington Post of Fox News.
This is yet another attempt to impeach the president. And sadly, it seems they care very little for any of the destruction they are leaving in their wake. We must test for the virus in order to stop the spread of it. What could be a very great recession. Some predicting even a depression.
At worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about.
I was about to say the same thing. We don't have immunity to this virus. It's a new virus. It's a pandemic strain of a virus we haven't seen before.
All the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality. Without a vaccine, the flu would be far more deadly. We are facing an incredibly contagious and dangerous virus that is moving across the world from one hotspot to another.
We're going to call out anyone and everyone who's using this virus as a political weapon against the president. The standard flu every single year kills tens of thousands of Americans. We are now entering what will be the crucial defining 15-day period as it relates to this virus, where we must slow the spread of coronavirus.
It's actually the safest time to fly. Everyone I know that's flying right now, terminals are pretty much dead. We have a responsibility to slow down this virus and to think of other people during this time. And so if you can keep your distance and prevent someone from getting close to you that might be sick, you could save your family, you can save the elderly, and help our country as a nation.
It is absolutely disgusting that Democrats are seeking to use this complex virus to score cheap political points. This dangerous health crisis could dovetail quickly into a political crisis, already feeling economic ramifications of it all.
There you have it. I mean, that, there's plenty more, but it just gives you a sense of just, yes, the lack of integrity that they can make this pivot without even sort of batting an eye. But the incredible harm that they have caused, and I would love to think that you know what, it's going to turn out, and it's, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Kids are out of school for a month. But I think in 3 or 4 months, maybe 2 months, we're going to be looking at this incredible disaster, this catastrophe. Obviously, they're not responsible for the coronavirus, but they are responsible for the way that huge numbers of Americans, as well as the president, responded to it at the crucial moment. And then there's this story, and maybe I'll dig into this more deeply tomorrow. Maybe that's what I'll do, is I'll just do one story. Tomorrow or something like that. The story from the Times where the president, I mean, there are all these assets that are available to us in the United States. Our military, maybe you're not aware of this, but is massive. And assets like medical beds on ships. Assets like the Army Corps of Engineers to build hospitals. The VA which apparently they've taken off their website. That part of their functioning is to help in moments of emergency and crises in the country. The military having the ability to sort of build temporary tents, isolation tents. And for whatever reason, these lunatics in the White House, and I think it's just like incompetence on a level that we can't even imagine. They have a 22-year-old or something like that running the office of basically that is responsible for hiring federal workers to deal with this. I don't know if we have anything but a acting Department of Homeland Security. The entire staff at Homeland Security is just sort of like political appointees at this point. It's stunning. It really is. It's stunning. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this?
Hey, Sam, it's Kowalski.
Kowalski from Nebraska. How are things in Nebraska, Kowalski?
From the sounds of it, about the same as everywhere else. I guess where I'm at, it's a little bit better. When you're in the countryside, everything's so spread out, you don't run into a lot of people.
All right. Well,
You there?
What else is happening?
Well, I was just calling in to tell your viewers thank you. I got a lot of support on the site from them and a lot of feedback, and I really appreciate it. So,
wait, did you have your election? I don't understand. And what were you looking for from them?
Oh, no, I had called in last week. I think Michael was hosting, and I shared my campaign site info and got a lot of feedback from people. A lot the coast area too, so that was pretty impressive.
Do you want to share it again?
Yeah, it's KowalskiForCongress.com, the only radical Republican with a pro-Medicare for all and climate change plan.
And so, now, when do you start getting a sense of how you're doing, and what are you going to do in this context?
Well, there was a good hope that there was going to be a debate, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to do that now. There is a rumor going around that this thing might get postponed until more into summer.
The primary.
So it's a really touch and go at the moment. I think Nebraska has actually handled this whole thing probably a little bit better than most. We had some of the first infected Americans from China brought into a National Guard base near Omaha. So this has been in the news here for 6 months or 6 weeks. So we had a couple week head start from everyone else.
Interesting. All right. Well, Kowalski, keep us updated. It's going to be a while before things, I don't know when they're going to return to normal, but there's going to be a while before things sort of, I think, snap into a
here's
new
a couple pro tips.
Okay.
Because I live in the countryside, a lot of times we go shopping for food for a month in advance. Do not snack out on all your cookies. When you feel very hungry and you want to snack, drink a lot of water. Just pace yourselves.
All right. Pro tip, don't get carried away with the cookies. You could have told my kids that the other day.
With your kids, since your 14-year-old is teaching, is she getting minimum wage with benefits, or how does the Cedar household handle that?
To be honest with you, she is getting minimum wage.
Well, you know what? Props off to you. You need a shofar for yourself.
I haven't set that up yet. She is getting minimum wage. That's specifically. She is getting minimum wage while she teaches, and but on the flip side, I'm thinking about charging her rent. So we'll see.
All right.
Appreciate
you guys
the
have
call.
a good one. Try to stay sane. See y'all later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Kowalski from Nebraska, folks. Check out his he is the radical Republican, sort of almost like in the sort of like the Republicans in what do you call it? Reconstruction. Some level, right? The other element about the failure of the Trump administration is over the testing. And I still believe we have yet to see to find out the real story about this testing. I am convinced, and I've said this in the past, I am convinced that what we have here in terms of the testing is a situation where somebody in the White House thought, like, hey, this is a good opportunity for us to make some cash. Maybe not in the White House, maybe, I don't know, but we don't need the World Health Organization's test for this. We can make our own test and make a killing. Here is Dr. Joseph Fair. He has got a master's of public health, I guess. He's on Chris Jansen on MSNBC yesterday.
They mentioned that, the first test, for at least the WHO test, was inaccurate and had been through the test. That's actually the opposite of what happened. The reason the WHO didn't offer us the test is because they only offer them for free to impoverished nations. We have to buy them. And the tests that were out that were inaccurate and not, false positives and false negatives, as Dr. Burtz mentioned, were actually the CDC test, not the commercial test. So that's the opposite of actually what happened.
And an important distinction.
So very important. They mentioned that, the first test for.
So there you have it. I mean, basically, the White House lying. And then the question is, it's like, why? Why are they lying about the refusal of the World Health Organization test? Why, when they were offered it by the German company that was producing it, why did they reject it? I mean, just American pride? Somebody was going to get rich off this. Monetize this. This is, this is part of the problem. This is part of the problem broadly in terms of structurally, but in the context of, I woke up this morning, I got some alert that Mike Pence said he was, that we're going to have 10,000, something like tens of thousands of tests are on their way. 2 weeks ago, they said millions of tests were on their way. Actually going in the absolute wrong direction. Calling from a 256 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Jacob Morrison from Alabama.
Jacob, what's on your mind?
Hi. So I have been listening to the show for a long time, and I've been really inspired by what y'all are doing and by the Bernie Sanders movement. He was the first vote that I ever cast. And so I've this year become increasingly involved in the labor movement. I've got a union at work. I've been really active there. I have helped to organize a branch of the IWW in my city. And another union brother and I are going to be on terrestrial radio here in April. And so I just wanted to know if there was any advice that you had for me. We're going to be talking, hopefully centering mostly around local and state issues. But we do, and we want to center it around, like, not necessarily super partisan. It's on a conservative talk radio. We want to kind of go out in, open their minds to a new perspective. So we don't want to be super partisan about it, but, talk about how they can help themselves through unions and organizing and solidarity. And so that's kind of what we're going to be working on. And I know that you've been in this business for a while, so I just wanted to see if you had any tips.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm happy for you, but I'm really happy that that's happening. Yes, my suggestion to you, because of the nature of terrestrial radio, you do not brand yourself as anything that would indicate your politics, and I think I don't have any specific tips to tell you, but I would listen to as much right-wing radio as you can. and I would look at what you're doing because you are literally behind enemy lines, as it were. It's a little bit of a, a little rhetorical. But I think to use their language, like, let me put it this way. I don't know if you're a religious person at all. I'm not particularly, but there are words that religious people use that aren't religious per se, but they indicate to other people, not maybe even on a conscious level, that they're talking to a religious person. And I'm trying to think
neighbor.
of neighbor, appreciate, they're like sometimes like you appreciate, there's like, faith, not used like talking about faith, but used as like a verb or, in other contexts but there's more, there's more than that. And I don't, at the top of my head, I don't have it. It's more of like I recognize it when I hear it to some extent. And I think that, like it is worth listening to some of the words and, I think it's perfectly fine to say like, part of self-reliance is being able to rely on others. And, like just be a corrective. And, like too many times, and I'm not in any way, I have no idea what you're going to do, but too many times I think on the left, there's this sense of like, I'm going to have a show or presentation that's going to be radically different from, other things. Well, I think from a political standpoint, and that may be interesting to watch and without a doubt and listen to. But from a political perspective, my sense has always been, make it a corrective. In other words, the format and all the trappings look like something they're used to, but the content is different. And so people are, people need to feel comfortable with, certain trappings. Not necessarily what you're saying, but like sort of like the way you do it. And, you make it like a radio show and you're feeding, if you're presuming that your audience is going to be mostly conservative. And if you're on a conservative station or you're going to have a significant number of conservatives,
Right.
That's who you're going to be talking
They play Rush Limbaugh. You were just talking about Rush Limbaugh earlier. Rush Limbaugh's on that station right now. So
there you go. I mean, and I would, the way I would talk about Rush Limbaugh on there would be never by name and never even like in a pointed way. I would be more like, can you, and obviously your show is going to be different than this, but there's value in saying like, can you imagine somebody coming out and downplaying this? What's going on here? It's almost impossible to imagine. Let those audience members of his who remember that he did that, just remind them of it. But you don't have to, I'm much more in the 2+2 camp than 2+2 = 4 camp. That's the way that I like to persuade people. I like to walk them up to the line and, because the ones who will add it up are you've convinced. Maybe, not as many will hear the words for, and not as many will come to the awareness of for. But if you say 2+2, the people who are going to go, oh, it's 4. Those are the people that you're going to have convinced. Does that make any sense?
yes, yeah, I think so, and that's definitely that's a lot of what we're trying. That really sounds a lot like what we're trying to do. The brother that I'm working on this with, he's a president of a local union here in town, and everybody knows his politics in his union. He wore an Antifa shirt in one of their collective bargaining negotiating committees, one of their pictures that went out in the international newsletter, right? And most of the people in his union are conservative, but he was elected president, and so he's not, it's not like he's shy about his politics, but kind of like how I feel like it's kind of like how Bernie Sanders won rural conservative voters in Vermont. They knew that his members know that he's going to be honest with them, and whatever his politics are, he's going to fight like hell for them.
Right.
And so, we're hoping maybe bring some honesty, integrity, and a little bit of a different way of thinking, and bringing some folks along for the ride.
Well, that sounds great. Well, good luck. Good luck to you, and keep us updated.
Yes, sir. Will do.
All right. Bye-bye. Good stuff. Glad to hear that. Let's just I'll pop this up and see if this works. This is a timeline of Donald Trump's statements over the course of where is that? Here we go. See if I can move that over. And these are statements that bear with me. I may not be able to get this up there. I'm not going to do that one. Bear with me, folks. I'll read it. How's that do? These are a timeline of some of Donald Trump's statements that he made about coronavirus. And I'm sorry, I just don't accept the notion that that now is not the time for politics, because I'm not a doctor. I have the ability to help anybody. I don't manufacture respirators. I don't have any here. I can't send them to a hospital. And at one point, we're going to get to the other side of this. And the American public should be aware of why we're in this situation. January 22. We have it totally under control. If it's one person coming in from China, it's just going to be fine. February 2nd, we pretty much shut it down coming in from China. Remember, Donald Trump and John Bolton, this Republican administration, eliminated the key leadership figure who sat on the National Security Council, who was in charge of coordinating responses to pandemics. And his entire staff, coordinating the disparate actions. I mean, like, Army Corps of Engineer, the VA, the Navy, because they have naval hospital ships. People maybe who work in commerce who would deal with manufacturing of respirators. How do we juice? How do we go and requisition? Apparently, the Army has hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of masks that could go to doctors, go to first responders, go to people working testing. Get tests. I mean, people need to bring this together. They had no ability to do this in the White House. And apparently nobody who could say to Donald Trump, like, hey, man, we got a problem. February 25th, February 24th, the coronavirus very much under control in the USA. Stock market starting to look very good to me. The 25th, CDC and my administration are doing a great job of handling it. I think on the 25th, I think it's a problem that's going to go away. They have studied it. They know very much. In fact, we're very close to a vaccine. He didn't, no idea what he was talking about. They've tried a vaccine on someone the other day. It's going to be 18 months before anybody, if it works. February 26th, the 15 cases in the U.S. within a couple of days is going to be close down to zero. 26th, we're going very substantially down, not up. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear, he said on February 27th. We're ordering a lot of supplies, he said on February 28th. We're ordering a lot of, elements that, frankly, we wouldn't be ordering unless it was something like this. But we're ordering a lot of different elements of medical. March 2nd, you take a solid flu vaccine. You don't think you could have much of an impact on corona? He asked the doctor. I remember that video. That was funny. A lot of exciting things happening very rapidly. March 4th, if we have thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that get better just by, sitting around and even going to work. Some of them go to work, but they get better. On the next day, he said, I never said people that are feeling sick should go to work. March 5th, the United States has, of now, only 129 cases and 11 deaths. We're working very hard to keep these numbers as low as possible. On the 6th, I think we're doing a really good job in this country of keeping it down, a tremendous job of keeping it down. March 6th, anybody right now needs a test, gets a test. They're here. The tests are beautiful. The tests are all perfect, like the letter was perfect. Like the letter was perfect. The transcription was perfect. Right? This is not as perfect as that, but pretty good. March 6th, I like this stuff. People are surprised. I understand it. March 6th, I don't need to have the numbers doubled because of one ship that wasn't our fault. That was the cruise liner. One point, in a rally, he said it was a hoax. I think that should be in this, too. By March 9th, he says this blindsided the world. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. There was a cost in electing this guy. Sheer incompetence actually matters. Sheer incompetence actually matters. What the Republican Party has unleashed on this country by supporting a guy and kowtowing to a guy who completely incapable of doing this job. Not even just incompetent, but dispositionally impossible of doing, just incapable of doing this job. And you can say the Democrats are no good, and a lot of the corporatists in the Democratic Party have created a tremendous amount of misery. I am afraid that we're going to see an amount of misery that none of us alive have seen in this country. And at the end of the day, this fundamental belief that government is nothing but an opportunity to enrich oneself, if it is anything, it's going to end up killing a lot of people. I think it's going to end up killing a lot of people. And yet, you have what's going on here? Bear with me, folks. Well, this is where it's at. And yet, you have someone like Dana Bash saying something like this.
I mean, look, this is just coming back to where this conversation started after the press conference. I hear what Sanjay is saying about Tony Fauci giving, a little bit more wiggle room than others. But if you look at the big picture, this was remarkable from the President of the United States. This is a nonpartisan. This is an important thing to note and to applaud from an American. Asking him to do it, whether it was Newt Gingrich sitting in Italy watching firsthand what's happening, or his friends at Fox News who have changed their tone. Probably all of the above is what happened, but it is so important to hear him strike that tone of calm and of understanding of how incredibly dire this is. And the fact that he even said on the notion of people going out, somebody asked about, well, what about, people of all generations going out when they shouldn't? And he said they shouldn't, and they're actually performing self-policing, that they're telling, they're trying to, it's peer pressure. They're telling people not to do it. I mean, that's pretty incredible from a guy who a couple of days ago was trying to downplay this to keep the economy going.
Right, Don saying everything was perfect.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You're going to give this guy credit for having a rudimentary response to this? He's really stepping up now. Are you kidding me? This is insanity. This guy it's like, he saw the dynamite was lit. He went over and refused to concede that it was lit. He refused to concede that it was. He walked away from it. It blew up, but then he walked back and said, it looks like it's actually exploded. And then getting praise for that. They've got to pull her off the air. That's like, I don't know. I mean, this is a news show, right? You're supposed to like interpret the events of the day. That's insanity. That is sheer insanity, as far as I can tell. Sheer insanity. Meanwhile, this is pretty stunning. Those guys over at the Daily Wire, they still exist, apparently. And this is they're just having a frolicking old time over at the Daily Wire. Who are these guys? It's Jeremy Boring. Am I saying his name right? Jeremy Boring, Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire. Here we go.
I've noticed the boomers aren't taking this virus very seriously. Are you guys noticing the same? Well, we don't want to talk about the virus, but we love to talk about the boomers.
Yeah, we do. I call it the boomer plague, actually, this virus. But do love talking about the boomers. The boomers destroyed civilization.
Yeah.
So that's on them.
100%.
But they have been around for a long time, and they've seen a lot of scares, and they've seen a lot of media hypes before.
That's right.
And so I think they might not be totally wrong on this issue.
I also think that when you're in your 70s and 80s, you've contemplated mortality more than when you're in your 30s and 40s. So the people most at risk.
Hold on, pause it. Did you catch what Knowles just said there? They may be a little skeptical about this, and I think they could be right. I think they could be right, he's saying. I mean, this is what happens when the folks at the Daily Wire are like, you know what? The key for now is to be comedic. And then they just go to the hackiest take they could possibly find.
Totally wrong on this issue.
I also think that when you're in your 70s and 80s.
Hold on, I want to go back just a little bit here.
A lot of media hypes before.
That's right.
And so I think they might not be totally wrong on this issue.
I also think that when you're in your 70s and 80s, you've contemplated mortality more than when you're in your 30s and 40s. So the people most at risk of being killed by this virus are actually probably the most at peace about being killed by the virus. I will say this, though. I have always wanted to have oceanfront property in southern Florida.
Yeah. We'll leave it there, okay? We'll leave it there.
I've noticed the boomers aren't.
I have a feeling that clip is not going to age well for them. I have a feeling just that may not age well for them. There's nothing worse than bad comedy. Yes, they should have. It would work if they had like a snare drum in the corner, doing the ba-dum-bump type of thing. Calling from an 801 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Josh from Salt Lake City.
Josh from Salt Lake City. What's on your mind, Josh?
So just wanted to mention something about the supposed electability argument that Biden has above Sanders, because you see all the exit polls show that voters, to a majority of voters even, will agree with Sanders far more than they do with Biden. Yet it's the electability thing that they're voting ultimately on. Yet that seems like just a bad strategy for the general election, because Biden himself is, I mean, essentially Hillary Clinton 2.0. He is very involved with the Obama administration, which can be in part at least blamed for the rise of Trumpism and that part of the conservative Republican movement. He has just as bad, if not a worse record than Hillary Clinton ever did with all of his time in the Senate. It seems to just be the electability rather than actual policy that voters care about, especially as we can tell, older voters. So I'm hoping that, by the next time around, if Biden does end up losing, which I'm fairly certain he would, and I think even worse than Hillary did, I think Trump has a chance of actually winning a majority of the vote against Biden, which would be crazy because he would be, the second president ever to lose the popular vote the first time around, but then win the popular vote the second time around. And I would blame it squarely on this so-called electability argument that the Democrats have to throw every time against an incumbent Republican.
Well, I mean, listen, you're right. 65% of, to the extent that we can know this from exit polling, 65% say that they are voting based upon who they think is most electable. I think about 35% say they're voting on someone who agrees with me on the issues, and the majority of those people are supporting Bernie, and the majority of the other one is supporting Biden.
Right.
Now, my biggest concern a month ago about Joe Biden was really had to do, and he's not the same as Clinton. Clinton had to deal with misogyny. Joe Biden, certainly not a victim
There's been
of
more
misogyny.
institutionalized hate of Hillary Clinton.
And yes, and without a doubt,
true
there was
to her than
there
it
was
is for Biden. Yeah.
there's misogyny. I don't know how much that plays into it. Is it 1%? Is it worth 12,000 votes in Wisconsin, or 20,000 in Wisconsin, 12,000 in Michigan? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. There's the fact that there was a 40-year industry of demonizing Clinton. Did that cost her votes? Maybe. I think so. I mean, I think there's also, and I've said, let me finish. I've said that there's, about 12 other reasons why she lost. And a month ago, I was very concerned that Joe Biden, that the problem was that he was not exciting anybody, and that he was not going to drive people to the polls. I mean, that was my assessment. He's just not going to. And he's not getting donations. He's not going to drive people to polls. And I've been a strong Sanders supporter. I remain a strong Sanders supporter. But I will tell you that there have been two data points that make me feel like that my assessment a month ago was in part incorrect, and that facts on the ground have changed. One is we had a record turnout in Arizona. We had a record turnout in Virginia. And they were not coming out to vote for Bernie. They were coming out to vote for him. And they weren't coming out to vote for him. They were coming out to vote against Donald Trump. And we saw that in 2018. I think those big numbers were all votes against Trump. And I think that is the primary directive. Now, my other concern about Joe Biden was he can't physically make it to the, or he can, but there's a chance that he can't, right? And I will say this, that Donald Trump is going to be in a deep, deep hole because of this coronavirus.
Yeah.
The economy and the way that he handled the actual disease, deep, deep hole. On top of which, the liability about Joe Biden, he can't motivate people to go out and canvass for him. He can't do 3 election stops a day. I mean, I thought he would do like 2 a week. That's no longer a liability either. Nobody expects him to. Nobody wants him to. He wouldn't be allowed to. And so, I got to tell you, I think if I had to bet now as opposed to a month ago, my bet would change. And I am not surprised by the desire of Democratic voters to just come out and vote against Trump. I think what happened was, absent Pete Buttigieg and Klobuchar coming out and endorsing him and that whole cavalcade, I think maybe it's a very different race. But I can tell you this, you can go back and listen to what I was saying at this time in 2016, and I was saying, I have been in this situation before where Democrats have responded to a horrible president, and what they're willing to settle for and get excited about is bizarre in my mind.
Right.
But
sure,
people want Donald Trump out. And I do think, I am concerned that if Biden does not make enough overtures, not to Bernie himself, but towards Bernie's policies, because they're supported by, like you say, the people who came out to vote because of issues were voting for Bernie because of his issues. And they are waiting. It's not a question of like Bernie doesn't deserve this or Bernie that. People whose analysis focuses on these individuals who say Bernie doesn't deserve this, Bernie didn't get this amount of votes, Bernie didn't get a mandate, they are missing, their analysis is garbage because it's irrelevant what Bernie himself deserves. It's irrelevant what Bernie himself is like. Bernie's voters were the only voters in these type of numbers who were coming out in this election to vote for a set of policies, to vote for an approach towards government and an approach towards our society. If Joe Biden does not make more of an effort to adopt those, not because Bernie deserves it or Bernie this or Bernie that, if Joe Biden doesn't do that, the people that cannot hear the sound of my voice, cannot hear you, do not read Twitter, we're in jeopardy of them staying home again. Now, does that mean he will lose? No, not necessarily, because there was a lot of other factors with Clinton. But if you're saying it's all hands on deck moment, then put all hands on deck and go after those voters. That's my point. So, and I agree with some of what you're saying, but I think, if I'm going to be honest with people, Joe Biden's chances today, you have to assess them as much better than one would have assessed them a month ago. Both because of the turnout in Virginia and in Arizona, and because of, what's happening, in our society today. And so that's just, that. So that's
if I can make one more point.
Go ahead.
I do believe that Trump's handling of Corona has definitely thrown the election more up into the air than it was a month ago. I think Biden could win it. I don't think it's a definite for sure, mainly because those states that Biden definitely needs to win are the states that voted against Hillary. I realize that there is a modicum of issues that, people hated Hillary for, but in those particular states, I think one of the biggest things was trade. And if Joe Biden, again, gets hammered on trade as hard as Hillary was, then those states are, I mean, you can't flip, if they can't flip the 40, 50, whatever thousand votes that lost those 3 states to Trump, then it's nothing. So I think trade is his biggest liability. And frankly, going forward, I think trade is a big liability for the Democrats as a whole.
I agree.
The Republicans are still running a trade guy, whereas Democrats are still going with the people who are corporatists.
I will
trade
say this,
people
Josh.
who care about the corporation.
My assessment has changed in terms of his electability, but if he does lose, it will be because of that. And it will be because Trump gets to the left of him on a whole host of issues. I appreciate the phone call. In fact, right now, the AP is reporting that Donald Trump has announced a suspension of foreclosures and evictions through April. I mean, I guess that's good. Because of the virus outbreak. Now, I don't know what that translates into. Like, you can't start foreclosures during April, but if you miss a payment, start those foreclosures in May. I don't know. Same with evictions. But we have now, from the LA Times, 18% of workers have lost jobs or hours since the coronavirus hits. It's according to a poll. I mean, that's quick. Connecticut unemployment claims reached 30,000 since Friday. The typical number on a week, that's 30,000 in a week. And we're not even there yet. We're not even at the week. We're 4 days into the week. The typical number is 3,000 to 3,500 a week, and it's at 30,000 halfway through the week in Connecticut. The coronavirus may or may not kill tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I've seen, there are estimates, a couple of million in this country. We don't know. What I can assure you is that it is going to wreak havoc on this economy in a way that I think could even be significantly worse than 2008. And there is zero reason to believe that Donald Trump has the competence to deal with this. Now, what he does have is a survival instinct, which is that he knows that, if he gives stuff to people, and that may be problematic. Because if he gets to the left, again, of Joe Biden, that's going to be a problem. Speaking of Joe Biden, let's take a look at this. This is the speech he gave last night. He had done quite well last night. Here, let's take a phone call, and then we will wrap this up. I'm not sure what we're going to do tomorrow. I may just take phone calls tomorrow till we get this down. I need, I need some new equipment to be able to sort of do the type of things that we're trying to do here. Calling from a 631 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Phil McCrory. I'm calling from Suffolk County, Long Island.
Phil from Suffolk County, welcome to the program. I should tell people, like, you don't have to give me your.
Oh, no, that's fine, because actually, Sam, part of the reason I'm calling is because I'm going to run for Congress in the 2nd District here in New York, Peter King's old seat.
Phil, in that case, you should give me your last name. Well done. You passed the first test of running for office.
Yeah, and well, I'm going to be running as an independent, though, because the Democratic Party on Long Island, I don't know if anybody knows, is not. Yeah.
That's where Sean Hannity. It's Sean Hannity territory.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have a score of really conservative Irish Catholics that come from the 2nd District, but I guess I'm culturally one of those people, but certainly not in the vein of a Sean Hannity or Bill O'Reilly. Yeah, and so like the reason I'm running as an independent is because it costs money to get in. First of all, that I don't have, and I'm not going to be able to get volunteers to get those signatures running as a Democrat, I believe, in the 2nd District.
How are you going to go about getting signatures in the first place? I mean, who's going to stand out there?
Well, right now, yeah.
Right. I mean, how does that? Has there been any indication of like how that's going to be? Dealt with?
So far, no. I mean, like, I couldn't get through to the Board of Elections when I called. But like, I can't deal with the parties here anyway. So I went the independent route, and the independent route means I can't even collect signatures until I think April 15th or the middle of April, April 13th, 14th. And then I have 4 weeks to collect 3,500 signatures.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, I might be SOL depending on how they're going to handle this. I've heard nothing from the Board of Elections. Never mind for the party primaries. Never mind for independent candidates.
Well, it seems to me that they're going to have to do something where it's like an online thing, where you set up a page, maybe it's a Google document or what, and people have to certify this is my name, and they type it in. And if that's the case, in some ways, it's going to be helpful to you, right? Because then you don't need to raise a lot of money to get people out there. You can use other mechanisms in which to market online. I mean, certainly if that's
absolutely,
if that ends up being the case with this, send me an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com, and we'll let you come on and try and get people to sign your petition to get on the ballot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so right now I have a campaign set up, campaign site set up, ready to take donations, which originally was going to help me collect those signatures. Now I don't know what that's going to be, but people can kind of check me out. I'm a little unorthodox too. I'm trying to do something. I've heard a lot of people talking in this program about really using identity politics as class politics. Here on the South Shore of Long Island, like, there's a lot of really angry working class people who couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary Clinton, but despise, the establishments of both parties pretty significantly. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a working class Long Islander who's affiliated with a political party.
Right.
Like on the South Shore here, anyway.
All right, fair enough. What's the website?
Oh, so it's www.philmac, it's PHILMAC, for Congress.com.
Okay.
And it's Phil McCrory. It's a little bit of a funky spelling, so it's just PhilMac for Congress.com.
Good. That's a good idea. And I would also say you don't need to say the www. If they need to know the www, they can't find it anyways.
That's true.
All right, Phil. Well, I appreciate it. Keep us updated.
Yeah, I'll send you guys an email. Thanks.
Okay, great. Let's go back to the phones. Calling from a 204 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? $204. Going once. Going twice. Gonzo. Calling from a 310 area code. Who's this?
Hey, Sam. This is Cassandra from Los Angeles. How are you doing today?
Good. Hi, Cassandra. What's on your mind?
Well, first, can I ask you before we get started that eventually when we do get back to civilization and we can start working back at offices, can I list on my resume that I was like a calling commentator for the Majority Report, like for my Droplets Gap? just to kind of boost my resume so I can go find a job once we finally can get back to civilization.
Well, I mean, if we were talking about one of the plans that we would start at the Majority Report once we get back into that was padding people's resumes for a price, of course. But
well, you know, I'm all for it. Actually, it was one of the many Facebook groups that I've been in now to kind of combat social distancing. Like a lot of the stay-at-home moms, they've been talking about what they've been doing all these years is just establishing LLCs and then like putting that in their resumes when they do go back to work as like, oh, that's what I've been working for all this time. But anyways, that's not why I was calling. So, you know, just to go back to, you know, all the COVID, all this commentary and, you know, just Trump's response on it. When I was watching his address on, I think it was either Monday or Tuesday, I was just like, just so taken back. I mean, we all know just how unprepared they all look like they're just running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And I'm just like, just astonished when he's out there. Like, how has nobody told him, one, stop telling the public to go to their primary care physicians to be tested for this. Like, there are no PCPs out there that have this test. I just like, I don't have, maybe I don't have the insight. I just don't understand how his staff has not like pulled him aside already and be like, look, you got to stop telling people this. Like, and the fact that he's outsourced, like,
well, they may
the
have.
testing to like,
I mean, they may have. They may have said like, oh, no, primary care physicians, I don't care. I'm going to go out there and tell people. People want to be calm. Nobody has the disease. So we just tell them you can go get tested and it won't be an issue. I mean, is it hard for you to imagine him saying that? It's not hard for me to imagine that. Guys, pathological.
And I guess that really points to how naive I am, because I'm just like, why would you tell?
I don't
panic, and it's not going to look good on you. And I guess that's really just pointing towards how naive I am about this situation.
your phone is falling apart for some reason.
It's hitting the fan now. Let's just throw away the facade.
Yeah. I don't know if you can hear me, but your phone is. Your phone. Hello. Hello. Something happened with your phone. Hello. Okay. All right. I gotta let you go. Okay. It was her, right? It wasn't me. Right? Her phone. She did something with her phone. All right. Final call of the day. Tomorrow, folks. I'm more than likely going to take a lot of calls. Calling from a 307 area code. You are the final caller of the day. I don't have my soundboard.
No worries, Sam. This is Shane from Wyoming.
Shane from Wyoming.
And I am calling in regards to your conversation yesterday about the Supreme Court.
Fair enough.
It's just the fact it kind of looks that Joe Biden is going to wrap this thing up, and if he does win against Trump in November, how likely do you think it is that McConnell's going to let him get his Supreme Court pick in?
I would say that if Biden wins, I think there's a good chance that the Democrats pick up the Senate. I think if Biden wins, it's going to be a bit of a blowout. But if Biden wins, do I think McConnell lets him have a pick? I think that yes, but I think he might posture in a way, and it's not hard for me to imagine Joe Biden going over to Mitch and saying like, "Look, I'm not going to make this hard for you, okay? You give me a list of 4 or 5 guys that obviously they can't be from the Heritage Foundation, but we'll get them through." Like I honestly think I could see Joe Biden doing that.
From my perspective, it's you have Joe Biden has, every time he's ever had anything to do with McConnell, gets rolled every time to the point it kind of seems like that's how Biden thinks. He
gets pre-rolled. I mean, I wouldn't even say done. I don't even think it's like, I don't even know, like, honestly, I don't even think you could say it's being rolled, because that sort of like makes it sound like, oh, there's like some type of chess game going on between these two. No, Biden's whole thing is just like, I'm gonna put my hand out and I'm gonna come on over. Come in. I mean, you know, I just that's Biden's MO. That's his MO. So
yeah, that just with reading Ryan's Grim book and seeing how Biden got in between Harry Reid and then that negotiation over the fiscal cliff.
Yeah, fiscal cliff, indeed. And he completely did an end round around Harry Reid because he just wants to be the guy. It doesn't matter what the guy is doing. He just wants to be the guy. And look, this is I don't know how old you are, but
I'm 38.
All right, so
I've seen some shit.
Okay.
Pardon me.
But you remember like guys like Max Baucus. Is it Baucus?
Yeah, well, I'm just north of me here. Yes, very familiar with Max Baucus.
Okay. So guys like Baucus and guys like Joe Lieberman, what they would do, and this came up during the course of talking about the filibuster, right? Like, do you make the filibuster, do you change it to 55 votes or whatever it is? These guys, and like now this day, like we have sort of like a Kristen Sinema and maybe Joe Manchin, and we're going to have Mark Kelly if he gets into office, and if it's hopefully it's Romanoff in Colorado, but if it ends up being Hickenlooper, is going to be one of these people.
I think Romanoff won that primary.
Well, he won the caucus. No, he did not. He won the caucus, but they also do a primary, and they do a primary too. So we'll see. I may try have him back on, but what they do is they wait, and they don't take a position on something until they figure out where the middle is, and then they place themselves in the middle. Because that's the way that they exercise power. You guys need me, and you guys need me. And then they have the power, and then they decide. And for what ends? Maybe it's because their benefactors want them to bring them. Maybe there's one thing that they want, right? And it's too. It's too shrouded for us to know what that is. All right, maybe Joe Lieberman. Let me just use Lieberman as an example. Joe Lieberman wants a specific provision for insurance companies. That's where his base of power always was. He came out of Connecticut, and a lot of those in Hartford, and he was AG there. And I don't know what the provision is. I just make it up. And there's a bill that is like remotely associated with insurance companies. He will put himself right in the middle of wherever the vote is. And he will, and if he needs 2 or 3 other people to control that block, he'll have a gang of 3 or a gang of 4 or a gang of 6 or a gang of 8. And each one of those people will get one of their goodies. And it'll be written into the bill. And this 6 will be, and the goodies could be also to exclude certain things in the bill. And they get into that middle spot because that's where they got a lot of power. They don't need a constituency. They don't need deep, broad appeal. They can do, it's just like literally, people make fun of me for still watching Survivor, but this is Survivor. It's the same damn thing because these guys in the middle, they don't have any more of a constituency than the people on Survivor do. It's really just dealing with 3 or 4, 5, 6 other people and trying to swing the bigger group. And that's it. And Joe Biden is one of those guys. So his instincts, it's all muscle memory. So, look, Chris Coons, his number one surrogate, has literally said if we take back the Senate, I think we should reinstitute the filibuster. Let me restate that. He's saying if the Democrats take back the Senate, I think we should allow the Republicans to thwart our agenda when it comes to justices and judges. I mean, is that being rolled? Or is that just literally saying like, hey guys, don't move, watch me roll? Like you're not being rolled, you are rolling. So I don't know, but I appreciate the phone call. Hope springs eternal. I have a feeling that very, very difficult to get a sense of where things are going to be, 9 months from now. Never mind, like 2 or 3 weeks from now. But appreciate the phone call.
All right. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.
All right, folks. Every day is an adventure. Some technical issues. We're going to work on this stuff. In the meantime, I want you to be safe. If you have a notice or a plug, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com, and we'll try and help you out. And then this.
It might take all the strength I got